And good morning, everyone. You're watching Fox and Friends First with Little Beatles on this Thursday morning. I'm Clayton Morris.
And I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much for starting your day with us. We do begin with a Fox News alert for you. Democracy under attack.
Violent riots erupting over President-elect Donald Trump's victory.
Thousands of protesters flooding the streets across the country, some even burning flags, all because they didn't get their way.
Patricia Stark joins us now with the very latest on this story. Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning, Clayton, Heather, and everyone. Our symbol of freedom up in flames. A rioter in New York City setting fire to the American flag. Just one of many disturbing protests playing out across the country. The images igniting outrage. Many now saying the violence from demonstrators goes against the very spirit of the democracy they're claiming to defend.
The burning of the flag, these protests, are really ignorant and hateful act. You know, that flag speaks to rights, not to results. So you can't say that you like the democratic process, but only if it comes out your way. It's like saying I like going to baseball games, but only for the score.
Anger and aggression from coast to coast as protesters trash streets and destroy everything in their paths, shouting profanities and chanting, "Not our president." Sheriff David Clark firing back at the, quote, temper tantrums, tweeting, "These radical anarchists must be quelled. There is no legitimate reason to protest the will of the people." Rioters in California break into this police car before smashing the windows. And thousands of high school students and teachers walked out of classes and rallied in the courtyard of Berkeley High School, a city known for its progressive politics. Others across the country calling for peace on social media. One post being shared on Facebook saying, quote, "We need peaceful unity to respect everyone's rights. Violence is not the answer." Lots of crazy stuff going on out there.
Yeah, and protests at the White House as well. Thanks, Patricia.
A lot of people taking to social media to do that.
Well, President-elect Donald Trump heading to the White House today as the biggest players in politics on both sides of the aisle unite.
Enemies and allies standing strong behind the next commander-in-chief following his historic election.
And Garrett Tenney is live in Washington, D.C. with Mr. Trump's transition team next steps. Good morning, Garrett.
Hey, good morning, Heather and Clayton. The Trump team has quite the to-do list over the next 2 months as it puts together the next administration. They've even created a website to keep the country updated on that process, greatagain.gov. The good news is that it appears they'll have plenty of support from both sides of the aisle. Today, Donald Trump will meet at the White House with President Obama to go over some of the transition plans. Trump's victory has certainly put much of the president's legacy in jeopardy, but yesterday, the president set an example for the country with his remarks on how to move ahead.
Because we are now all rooting for his success in uniting and leading the country. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy. And over the next few months, we are going to show that to the world.
Other Democratic leaders also offered their congratulations and offered their support, including his one-time Twitter rival, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who said she'd like to call a truce, and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who said she looks forward to working with President Trump on plans to rebuild the country's infrastructure. In Donald Trump's own party, House Speaker Paul Ryan praised Trump's victory and said the country can expect to see a lot of changes going forward now that the GOP controls both houses of Congress and the White House.
But Donald Trump heard a voice out in this country that no one else heard. He connected in ways with people no one else did. He turned politics on its head. And now Donald Trump will lead a unified Republican government. And we will work hand in hand on a positive agenda to tackle this country's big challenges.
Yesterday, the White House also announced that as the president-elect, Donald Trump will now be able to request and receive the same daily intelligence briefings as President Obama. Clayton?
We're going to talk about what he has planned maybe for the next 100 days coming up.
It'll be interesting. All right, Garrett Tenney live first in D.C. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you. For Hillary Clinton, meantime, showing grace in defeat, delivering a heartfelt concession speech and urging her supporters to give the president-elect a chance.
I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country. I hope that he will be a successful president for all Americans. This is not the outcome we wanted or we worked so hard for. This is painful, and it will be for a long time. Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead. Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power. And we don't just respect that, we cherish it.
Clinton also thanked the voters and staffers who were part of her historic run for the White House.
Well, the Republican victories in the White House and Congress putting President Obama's legacy in jeopardy. Obamacare, the Iran nuclear deal, and immigration, just some of the president's major initiatives at stake. Kevin Corke looks at what changes we might see from the Trump administration.
The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy. And over the next few months, we are going to show that to the world.
It was a message of unity. But while calling on the country to come together in the wake of Tuesday's fractious election result, President Obama may have lost more than just a chance to solidify his legacy. Also gone, a chance to influence the fate of some of his signature accomplishments, many of which were forged without the consent of Congress, including the Iran nuclear deal and Paris Climate Accord, policies to allow transgender bathroom use, and a unilateral effort at immigration reform. But while some of those have been struck down or delayed by the courts, it's his signature health care law, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, that could be most at risk. That was candidate Trump during the campaign, declaring an end to the health program that's been beset by sharp rate increases, a dwindling number of carriers, and fewer signees than expected. White House officials today said the president's policies were structured in such a way that should help them withstand attempts to undo them.
None of these policies that we've been pursuing were considered a stopgap measure or somehow temporary in nature. The president pursued these policies because of the long-term benefits they have for the American people.
Translation, even under ideal circumstances, unraveling the Obama legacy may prove a lot more complicated for the Trump administration than many would have believed.
At the White House, Kevin Corke, Fox News.
All right, thanks, Kevin. And Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer calling President Obama a wrecking ball, saying he only has himself to blame that his legacy could be crumbling.
I think what's overlooked is the role that Barack Obama did. Remember, he said 2 years ago, I'm not on the ballot, but my policies are, and he got shellacked. And then he said, this year, my legacy's on the ballot. And I think he's going to lose it. I think it's going to be undone, much of it, in the first 100 days, starting with Obamacare. Everything that he signed, all the executive orders, are gone. And I think he ends up a historic parenthesis. He has left the Democrats in ruins at every level. The governorships, the state houses, the House and the Senate, and now the White House. He's been a wrecking ball for Democrats, and I think he deserves a lot of the credit for Trump's victory.
We'll see if he takes that credit. Exit polls from the 2016 presidential election show that 4 in 10 voters, 39%, were looking for a candidate who would bring needed change. Of those voters, Donald Trump won an astounding 83%.
Well, one of the most watched Senate races in the country coming to an end in New Hampshire. Republican Kelly Ayotte conceding to Democrat Maggie Hassan, losing by just 1,023 votes. Really close. Ayotte congratulating her opponent, saying, quote, the voters have spoken and now it's time for all of us to come together to get things done for the people of the greatest nation, or the greatest state in this nation. Even with Hassan's win, Republicans still hold a majority in the Senate.
And the American flag could soon have an extra star. An overwhelming majority in Washington, D.C., voting to become the 51st state.
Mayor Muriel Bowser planning to present Congress with a proposal before Inauguration Day. It would give the city's lone congresswoman voting rights on the House floor and add 2 seats to the U.S. Senate.
Well, the time is now 9 minutes after the hour on the East Coast, 5:09 a.m. Big promises from our president-elect Donald Trump.
Real change begins with immediately repealing and replacing Obamacare. We will build a great wall.
All of that he wants to do in the first 100 days of a Trump administration. Can he do it? Our next guest with a look at the top priorities.
And hey, when's the next flight, by the way? Some major mocking taking over social media for all those celebrities, all those celebrities who promised to leave the country if the election didn't go their way.
And tomorrow is Veterans Day. We want to honor the brave men and women who served our country.
So send us your Veterans Day pictures. We always want to see that from you on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can also email them to friendsfirstfoxnews.com.
Is set to receive the same daily briefings as President Obama.
And the transition already underway. So what can we expect from his first 100 days in office? Here with some predictions, political commentator Erin McPike. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So let us know, what do you think is the number one thing that he is going to do? We know that he is meeting with President Obama today.
He is, but I don't think he's going to talk at length with President Obama about some of what he wants to do, even though President Obama, of course, wants to keep in place his signature achievement, which is Obamacare, as you know. But this is something that Donald Trump has talked at length about, that he wants to repeal and replace Obamacare. And that's something that Republicans in Congress have wanted for the last 6 years. Paul Ryan has been saying that that law is collapsing under its own weight. It was just announced last month that premiums will spike in 2017. This is something that he could work closely with Congress on over the first 100 days in just the way he does want to repeal and replace it.
So, Aaron, one of the criticisms from his own party was that he didn't have any specifics on what he wanted to replace it with. So hopefully we'll hear some more of that. He needs to lay that out. Also, he wanted to drain the swamp within his first 100 days. He wanted to set term limits for Congress, and he wanted to set moratoriums on people lobbying within 5 years after they leave a government job. Can he get that through?
Some of it he can and some of it he can't. We have heard from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who has been saying that he doesn't want to go after term limits, that elections are term limits. So that's something that Congress would have to pass, and it's unlikely he would get that. But he does want to impose a hiring freeze on federal workers so that he can reduce the size of the federal government through attrition. I do think some things like that he will get through. Donald Trump obviously wants to change Washington pretty dramatically, and I think some of that people do want to hear from and do want to see.
Yeah, speaking of reducing, he also wants to reduce the corporate tax rate to 15% from 35%. What do you think about that?
Well, I do think we're going to see some movement on corporate tax reform. This is something that the Obama administration actually wanted to get through, not with those rates exactly, but President Obama and Paul Ryan have talked at length about trying to get corporate tax reform pushed through. And I do think Donald Trump will try to work with Paul Ryan on that. He wants to have actually comprehensive tax reform, but I do think that will start with corporate tax reform.
All right, we got to talk about immigration. This, of course, is the big one. This is the thing that kicked off his campaign. We're going to build a wall, and we're also going to vet those. Serious vetting are the words that Trump used, to those people coming into the United States. But you're hearing over the past few days some Republicans saying, well, he'll learn when he gets in that it's not so easy, and we'll just kind of take things on a case-by-case basis. You're going to have a lot of angry voters if that wall doesn't start getting built right away.
I think that's right, but I think given the tone that we heard from Donald Trump on Tuesday night, really Wednesday morning, suggests that that may not be where he starts. We have heard from Mitch McConnell that they do want to push border security in the way that they can, but that may not be a wall. So I don't think that's the first thing that Donald Trump will push, is building that wall. They will start with, I think, some easier measures first before he can really start that in earnest.
What about energy infrastructure, the Keystone Pipeline, all of that?
Yes, exactly. Donald Trump actually laid this out in Gettysburg last month. He is going to go for a very serious infrastructure spending bill, but that's something that Hillary Clinton campaigned on as well, and that has resonated with a lot of American workers throughout the country. They do want to see a heavy infrastructure bill, so I think that's something that he will push. And of course, you're seeing Republicans in Washington also want to get rid of those restrictions on the Keystone Pipeline. I think we'll see that move through pretty quickly.
Well, even speaking to voters out in Western PA, of course, and voters all across this country who were fed up with the trade policies of the past 20 years. Will TPP and some other big trade policies, will we see those struck down almost immediately?
Certainly on TPP, Donald Trump has said that he will announce our withdrawal from that. He's also going to try to renegotiate NAFTA. That was something that he put in that address in Gettysburg as well. He certainly wants to move on trade very dramatically very quickly.
Yeah, those trade policies really being a big part of some of the constituencies and the voters that he was able to pull in at the last minute.
Aaron, 100 days. That's going to be a very busy 100 days, and we're going to keep you busy with it. Thanks, Aaron.
Yes, thanks.
All right, the time is now 18 minutes past the hour. With just 72 days left in office, does President Obama have a plan for all those pardons that we're used to seeing in the last minutes?
We don't talk about the president's thinking, particularly with respect to any specific cases that may apply to, pardons.
And no-fly zone, the massive security blanket for Trump Tower, courtesy of the FAA. Good song for all those folks who may not, have agreed with the decision yesterday. Keep your head up, new day.
Keep smiling.
Yeah. Well, now to a Fox Business Alert for you. Stock market surge. The Dow soars to a record high after President-elect Trump's victory.
Yeah, Cheryl Casoni from our sister network, Fox Business, is here with more on that. We heard about the big plunge. I guess it's back, Cheryl.
Yeah, well, we had that big overnight plunge as the results were coming in, and then traders, of course, the markets were down in the morning. But once they started to think about it, they thought, wait a minute, there are things about a Trump presidency that are good for the stock market. Think about healthcare. The shares of Pfizer jumped like 7% yesterday. I was looking at U.S. Steel that jumped 17%. Will more manufacturing come back to the United States? Banks. But take a look at the numbers from last night. Here's how we closed. 18,589. That was a gain of more than 1%. S&P, NASDAQ gaining more than 1% as well. So people had thought about it and realized there are buying opportunities here. And again, if Donald Trump does some of the things that he says he wants to do, that's very good for business and for the markets as well.
What about the FAA? Now, Trump Tower, and of course he has Secret Service protection, but now Trump Tower also has protection this morning.
Right. So, it's called a notice to airmen, and it's a temporary flight restriction within 2 nautical miles, within the airspace around Trump Tower that no one can fly. That's going to be in place until January 20th when the Trumps take up their official residence at the White House. But the bad news for tourists coming to New York, I want to warn you, that means all those helicopter flights over the Hudson and the East River, those aren't going to be operating until they leave New York. Sorry. Just want to warn you now.
All right, so now this is kind of embarrassing. How in the world did this happen? Newsweek, they kind of jumped ahead and made an assumption that they should not have done.
It's funny, we did this a couple of days ago on the Business Network, and we were like, wait a minute, Newsweek is putting out, they actually printed out the Hillary Clinton special edition, and they sent it to bookstores. But we're over here wondering, wait a minute, where's the Donald Trump edition? Well, they messed up. I mean, it was frankly a bet gone wrong. Now, we got a statement from Newsweek, and here's what they say. They say 2 special edition covers for 2016 election outcomes were produced by a Newsweek licensee, Topics Media, not by Newsweek. They're trying to kind of, well, not take the blame for it, frankly. But a bookstore employee back on November 7th said, oh, look at this. Interesting. We've got magazines with Hillary Clinton as president in a box in our store. Wait a minute.
Wasn't me. No,
well, it's like when they print out the World Series hats for the, for the Cleveland Indians. They're like, oh, those things will be on
But you didn't do a Donald Trump magazine, so Newsweek's kind of getting
what about Trump's books? He has like 30 different books. What about the sales of those now?
Yeah, so if you looked at Amazon after the election results came in, talk about some popular new books. Sales rankings jumped to 15 from 563 on Amazon's listed movers and shakers. That was for Trump, and that was The Art of the Deal. And then he has another book, Great Again, also jumped as well, now at 84. The original rank, as you can see, was much, much lower. So actually we don't have the number, but both of his books jumped much, much higher instantly on Amazon. People want to read about him.
Not really surprising.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you. Well, the time now is 25 minutes after the top of the hour, and tens of thousands hitting the streets in protest of the outcome of the 2016 presidential race.
Tell you is you got to be free.
Have to get together.
Come together right now.
So what does our president-elect need to do to bring the country together? Complete analysis coming up next.
But first, on this day in history, back in 1775, the U.S. Marine Corps was born. So happy birthday.
And in 1969, Sesame Street debuted.
Good song. Good to be alive. Good to be an American. Good morning to you. You are watching Fox and Friends First. I'm Heather Childers.
And I'm Clayton Morris. It is 31 minutes now past the hour. We'll begin with a Fox News alert. Violent riots erupting over President-elect Donald Trump's victory.
Thousands of protesters flooding streets across the country, some even burning American flags, all because the election didn't go their way.
Patricia Stark here now with the very latest on this story. Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning, Clayton and Heather. Well, our symbol of freedom up in flames. A rioter in New York City setting fire to the American flag. Just one of many disturbing protests playing out across the country. The images igniting outrage. Many now saying the violence from demonstrators goes against the very spirit of the democracy they're claiming to defend.
The burning of the flag, these protests, are really ignorant and hateful act. You know, that flag speaks to rights, not to results. So you can't say that you like the democratic process, but only if it comes out your way. It's like saying I like going to baseball games, but only for the score.
Anger and aggression from coast to coast as protesters trash streets and destroy everything in their paths, shouting profanities and chanting, "Not our president." Sheriff David Clark firing back at the temper tantrums on Twitter, tweeting, "These radical anarchists must be quelled. There is no legitimate reason to protest the will of the people." Rioters in California break into this police car before smashing the windows, and thousands of high school students and teachers walked out of classes and rallied in the courtyard of Berkeley High School, a city known for its progressive politics. Others across the country calling for peace on social media. One post being shared on Facebook saying, quote, "The fact that a woman was running for president equals incredible. The fact that a non-politician was running for president equals incredible. That's what makes America incredible. You can truly live out the American dream. Teach our children that." Clayton and Heather, we'll see what today brings.
Unbelievable. All right, thanks, Patricia. Yeah, the hashtag CalExit was trending yesterday. California looking to secede from the union. President-elect Donald Trump heading to the White House today as the biggest players in politics on both sides of the aisle unite. Enemies and allies standing strong behind the next commander-in-chief following his historic election. Garrett Tenney is live in Washington, D.C. with Mr. Trump's transition team's next steps. Good morning, Garrett.
Clayton, good morning. This transition has been in the works for months now, but over the next 2 months, Donald Trump's transition team will be working overtime to piece together his administration. And to keep you updated on that process, it's only fitting that the Trump team has a new Twitter handle, Transition 2017, along with a website, greatagain.gov. Today, Donald Trump will meet at the White House with President Obama to go over some of those transition plans. And yesterday, despite much of his legacy being in jeopardy with Trump's victory, President Obama set the standard for how the country should respond in the days ahead.
Because we are now all rooting for his success in uniting and leading the country. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy. And over the next few months, we are going to show that to the world.
We also saw other Democratic leaders coming out to express their support, including Trump's one-time rival, Elizabeth Warren, who offered to strike a truce. Her statement said in part, "It's no secret that I didn't want to see Donald Trump win yesterday. President-elect Trump promised to rebuild our economy for working people, and I offer to put aside our differences and work with him on that task." It's not just Democrats, though. Republicans who opposed Trump throughout the election are now offering their support as well. Former GOP nominee Mitt Romney tweeted, "Best wishes for our duly elected president. May his victory speech be his guide and preserving the republic his aim." And Ohio Governor John Kasich, who refused to endorse Trump, tweeted, "The American people have spoken and it's time to come together. Congratulations, President-elect Donald Trump." Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said Americans voted for change, and with the GOP controlling both houses of Congress and the White House, there's sure to be a lot of it.
I want to particularly congratulate President-elect Trump. I think we all agree this is a stunning election and clearly an indication the American people would like to try something new. And I know the Speaker shares my view that we would like to see the country go in a different direction and intend to work with him to change courses.
Yesterday, the White House also announced that as the president-elect, Donald Trump will now be able to request and receive the same daily intelligence briefings as President Obama. Clayton?
All right, Garrett Tenney live for us in D.C. this morning. Thanks, Garrett.
Well, the president-elect facing a big challenge to bring the country together. Mo Alithi of Georgetown University Institute of Politics explaining how he can bridge that gap.
I think in part with words and in part with actions. And he needs to move swiftly and somewhat delicately, but needs to go out there and speak to these groups and demonstrate through both words and actions that what he said in what I thought was a really good and strong speech, much more gracious than a lot of us gave him credit for being or for being able to be. He needs to prove the point he made in that speech that he does want to be a president for all Americans through his words, through his actions. So I think both sides of the equation here have some work to do.
So let's keep talking about this. What does President-elect Trump need to do to bring the country together? Log on to the Fox and Friends First Facebook page right after the show to weigh in. Hashtag keep talking.
All right, it's 37 minutes now past the hour, and a smooth transition. President-elect Donald Trump and President Obama meeting today. But why is ISIS looking so closely at the White House right now? Here to weigh in, Jillian Turner, who worked during the transition from the Bush administration to the Obama administration.
So you're not going to investigate Hillary Clinton if you're Attorney General?
Different story.
Oh,
you got a big choice there, and I don't know the right answer to it.
So what would it take for former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani to prosecute Hillary Clinton if he's named Attorney General? Find out about that next.
And when is the next flight? Some major mocking taking over social media because of all these celebrities. Remember all of them? They all promised to leave the country. Carly Shimkus is here with the social media election roundup. But first, a look at your weather across the country today. A new day in democracy continues. It's a live shot from Washington, D.C. with the American flags flying there in the wind. Well, President-elect Donald Trump and President Obama meeting today there in D.C. to discuss a smooth transition of power. What does that mean for President-elect Trump and his team, and why is ISIS looking so closely at the White House right now? Fox News contributor Jillian Turner worked during the transition from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, and she joins us now with more on this. Thank you so much for joining us early this morning.
Thanks, Heather.
So we know that President-elect Trump, he is now getting those classified briefings from the CIA. What about the conversation that will happen today between he and President Obama?
So that conversation is and the ensuing security briefings are really a fundamental part of the transition, the peaceful transition of power that we talk about all the time around election season. So the transition officially started. And I would say there's no official endpoint. It ends probably a couple of months, I'd say, after President Trump assumes the Oval Office. So what's going to start to happen now is he's going to get these classified daily national security briefings called the President's Daily Brief, the exact same version President Obama gets. And what this does is prepare Donald Trump for the global stage that he's going to inherit once he arrives at the White House in January. It will take him sort of country by country through the hot spots in the world right now where we face national security challenges and update him on what's happening on the ground, what threats that are posed to the United States are evolving, and maybe sometimes even help formulate potential policies.
And you would think one of the first things that he will have to do would be to appoint a Secretary of Defense. There are some names that are being tossed around, Senator Jeff Sessions being one of them.
Yep, one of the front runners, also General Flynn. If I was advising President Trump, I would say, you know, Mr. President, it's really important that you name your defense and national security teams as soon as possible so that when you assume office, everybody knows their roles and responsibility and is ready to really hit the ground running as much as possible. The other thing that will happen is if he prepares cabinet secretaries, they'll be able to get, some of them will be able to get classified security briefings along with him so that they have that knowledge under their belt as well when they join him.
Now, we mentioned that ISIS specifically is looking right now, this time, at what's going on. Why is that, and what are they looking for?
So ISIS, and not to be a fearmonger, but probably a lot of terrorist organizations look at this time period, the transition, these few months, as a very vulnerable time period for the United States government, and that's because we're really in flux. Starting January 20th, everyone pretty much who's been in a political appointment anyway at the White House is going to be gone. That's the top most senior level of folks, and new people will be coming in. Imagine if you showed up to Fox News today and we had all new employees. Right. It would be very disorienting. It would take you a while to kind of acclimate, figure out whose roles and responsibilities are where and which. And that's what happens at the White House, just like any other corporate culture or government culture in this country. It takes people a while to get their bearings and figure out where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do. So from a national security standpoint, you can kind of see how that might make us a little bit more vulnerable.
So also particularly important for both the outgoing administration and the incoming administration to show a sign of unity to all of these folks around the world who are watching.
And it's really, the onus right now is on the Obama administration to really make sure that whoever President Trump is bringing in is up to speed on whatever they've been working on. When I worked through this transition from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, the guidance from President Bush started 6 months out from the end of his final term in office, and we were instructed to create these briefing books, every single person that we passed on to our successor, so that they knew everything we'd been working on and where every single issue stood. I hope that this administration is doing something similar.
Yeah, well, we heard the statement from Defense Secretary Ash Carter yesterday saying, let's make this transition smooth. So that's probably one of the reasons. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
Clayton?
All right, thanks, guys. Well, the White House says it's not ruling out a pardon for Hillary Clinton, even though she's not facing any charges. This in response to a campaign promise from President-elect Donald Trump to open a special investigation into Clinton's private email server. When asked what he would do if appointed U.S. Attorney General, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani had this to say.
So you're not going to investigate Hillary Clinton if you're Attorney General?
Different story.
Oh.
You got a big choice there, and I don't know the right answer to it. There's one tradition in America, right? Election's over, we forget about it. There's another tradition in America, which is equal justice under the law. And it would depend on how bad the violations are.
The FBI not charging Clinton for her private server, but a federal investigation into the Clinton Foundation is still open. Meanwhile, a scramble for new regulations as voters give recreational marijuana the green light in a few states. Massachusetts' top pot regulator asking to delay the opening of weed shops across the state. She says the January 2018 deadline doesn't give lawmakers enough time to build a specialized police force. And in California, lawmakers must decide how to manage the hundreds of millions of dollars expected from weed sales. And another issue there, licensing the influx of marijuana dispensaries. How do you tax it? That's got to be the major focus. Brian Kilmeade is standing by with what's coming up on Fox and Friends this morning. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Clayton. That's great news for many people on our staff when it comes to the pot laws. Maybe they'll be leaving for different states. We'll have to look. I won't name any names.
Can we move to Boston?
We'll have an opportunity. A lot of people want to move out of the country in some respects. Hey, let me tell you what we have on our agenda over the next 3 hours. The transition has already begun, believe it or not. About 70-plus days till President Trump takes over. So what could President-elect Trump's cabinet actually look like? Rudy Giuliani will have a major role. He'll bring us the inside scoop. And one of the main reasons I have not become a UFC fighter is because of the travel. There are no fights in New York. Now that's going to be solved this weekend. Madison Square Garden will host. Dana White, the guy in charge of the UFC, will be here live and talking about fighting in America. Can't we all just get along? A lot more coming up on Fox and Friends first, and then us in 12 minutes. Please get dressed.
Can you have the friends come over for a play date?
Yeah.
Well, the long list of celebrities saying they'll leave if Donald Trump wins the presidency are still here, and now they're getting slammed on Twitter.
Carly Shipkiss with Fox News Headlines 24/7, Sirius XM 115, here with social media's reaction to the election.
Yeah.
Canada was supposed to become Hollywood 2.0, but it looks like a whole lot of realtors are going to be pretty disappointed. Celebrities like Lena Dunham, Jon Stewart, Miley Cyrus, and Amy Schumer, just to name a few, all pledged to flee the country if Donald Trump was elected president. And now some folks on social media are wondering when they plan to leave. Vicky for Trump writes, wonder if Cher, Samuel L. Jackson, Lena Dunham, and Miley Cyrus's bags are packed yet. The sooner they leave the USA, the better. And Kentucky Senator Rand Paul said this on Twitter, I'll be watching my TV today to see which of the Hollywood elite will board their private planes and leave America. But it looks like one celeb has had a change of heart. Miley Cyrus posted this tearful video on Facebook Live.
I still think that in her lifetime she deserves to be the first female president. Donald Trump, I accept you, but I even accept you as the president of the United States.
Amy Schumer is also backtracking, saying she has no intention of leaving the country. I think we all could have called that one, right?
Well, Cher apparently is now saying she's just going to go to outer space.
Yeah, Jupiter.
Yeah.
Jupiter is a gas giant. There's no land available there.
Uh-oh, yes, that's going to be a very big issue.
Get a house there.
She should have thought about that beforehand.
I'm here to help. What about schools consoling all these students? They were setting up like different areas where kids could basically go and cry.
Yeah, unreal. You're right. Colleges around the country are pretty much going into panic mode. A Yale economics professor is under fire for making an exam optional so students could cope with election shock. The superintendent of Boston Public Schools sent a letter to families telling them they would be providing counseling, writing, the Boston Public Schools Behavioral Health Department is available to support students who may be having a difficult time processing any fears or concerns. Other schools offering free pizza and even puppies. This comes as thousands of protesters took to the street overnight to protest the election results.
Yeah, pizza and puppies.
Mm-hmm. That sounds fun. But come on.
Okay, so the Beast, it's getting an upgrade?
Yeah, looks like President-elect Trump is getting a new set of wheels once he takes office. Images of the new presidential limo, nicknamed the Beast, were leaked online. It looks like the car will be a little roomier with an elongated body. It will be debuted on Inauguration Day in January. How about that? He's a pretty tall guy. He needs a little extra leg room.
He does. And a big family.
That's true. A lot of kids.
All right. Thanks, Carly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's now 5 minutes until the top of the hour, and you're looking live at the White House, where our president-elect is headed today.